who's on deck for what is the actual accountability, and then how are you able to have visibility across different projects, both internal and external and across external, so that you can make decisions based on the information that you're given.
Welcome to the Agile Digital Transformation Podcast, where we explore different aspects of digital transformation and digital experience with your host, Tim Butera, Content and Community Manager at AgileDrop.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. Our guest today is Juliana Marulanda, founder of the agency growth consultant ScaleTime. She has over 20 years of experience across Wall Street, the nonprofit sector, technology startups, and family-owned businesses, during which she has helped scale over 500 digital agencies. Today, we'll be talking about the most common project management challenges and how to tackle them. Juliana, welcome to the show. Anything you want to add before we begin?
I am so happy and honored to be here. So thank you for having me today.
Thanks for joining us. It's very great to have you, as I just said. And yeah, the topic is, I know that probably a lot of people listening are working in project management, managing projects, managing teams, maybe managing products. And we're here to bring you a lot of invaluable pieces of info and insight. So Juliana, let us start with the basics. So what are the top project management challenges today? And also, what are the main differences in this field, in this context now, as opposed to the pre-COVID era?
Yes. So I would say that the top challenges are basically pretty basic. It's I don't think they've changed a lot over the years. I think infrastructure has changed, right? In COVID. And I'm gonna say, like, mostly it's things such as like adoption. How do you get your team to actually, use project management, use your methodology of project management, switch, methodologies of project management. So I think adoption is always one of the biggest lifts, right? It's not actually getting into the weeds and doing the project management. It's getting the team to buy in and do it consistently. The other one that I would say is actually managing workflow and capacity. Right. So it's not just about like, oh, well, is everyone accountable? Do we have statuses? Are there handoffs? Right. Like it's actually about what is the information giving us so that we can better manage the profitability of our projects, the burnout of our team. I think that is huge. Right. So it's being able to actually look at the information and say, OK, well, what are our workflows telling us? What is the information telling us? What is the capacity, the utilization of the team? So I think that's really important. And the other thing that I would say is dirty data, right? So dirty data is such a thing in project management, because a lot of it, if we can think about it, is like, what is the information giving you? Can you trust the information? Can you trust that the template that you are using is the right template, or are there like 20 different templates for the same thing? Can we trust the system? If not, then people are gonna, Slack, Teams, bug you, ping you, ring you, instead of going into the project management. And I think that's a huge deal, right? And I would say the differences between today versus pre-COVID, and COVID's still happening in some parts of the world. So I always like to say that with with caution. I think we have so much more of a remote culture than we did before. And there's things such as like handoffs, right? So instead of going and walking over to someone's desk and being like, hey, John, it's your turn to do the X, Y, and Z, we have to rely on the system, right? The other thing I would say is also like spontaneous feedback. So again, it's not like, hey, let's review this thing, or, like you meet and you're grabbing coffee. Hey, I have an idea about the report that you just made, right? It's, we have to now containerize and contextualize our feedback so that it actually lands in the right place, right? So is it within the thread of the comment section of the actual project that you're doing, or is it stuck in email or in a solution, a communication solution like a Slack, right? Are we actually giving the feedback on a timely basis? And are you making time for that review process? Like, so much of it is managers or owners, like they don't have time to review, right? And then they're like, well, why am I reviewing the same thing over and over again? Right? Like, why can't the work product just be the way that I want it to be? Right? So I think that's a major difference, that now we're relying on that technology, right? And again, the adoption of new technologies in a post-COVID era, right? Because I think more than ever, it's like battle of the project management tools, right? So like all these different, tools now got millions upon millions of investment to make things better. I think the insertion of AI is also making things different now. And so how are people adopting not only the project management technology, but the add-on technology that is happening with it, right? As the future of work is now.
So yeah, the biggest changes are definitely basically what we've seen across the board, right? One major change, one aspect is the surge of new technologies and how to kind of get used to all this change. And the other is the move to more remote work, which kind of opens up a lot of new things. Like one thing that's very much on the rise because of that is a lot more companies have been much more open to collaborations, with digital agencies in this kind of context. And I'm wondering, for the sake of our conversation, are there any specific project management challenges when you're collaborating, across different agencies, across multiple teams, maybe that are positioned globally versus a completely in-house process, even if that in-house process is, distributed globally?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say one of the biggest things is what technology are you using? What communication tools are you using, right? So are you using your own? So are you having the agency's team use your technology? Are you using their technology? Are you creating redundancy by using both, right? Do you have automation to build sort of a streamlined way between both of technologies so that people aren't putting information in both, and so things are getting hairy and doubling up, and and we're coming back to that dirty data scenario.
Yeah, exactly.
So I think that's one of the first challenges, right? It's like, whose tech are you using, and have you even set those expectations from the beginning, right? Because sometimes those expectations aren't set, and if you're working with multiple agencies, right, then how are you able to visualize all of the information across campaigns, across programs, so that you're able to actually see things, right, and have visibility from a strategic standpoint, not just a tactical one. So I think that's a huge one. The other one I would say is, who are the stakeholders, right? And I work with, I've worked with so many agencies, right? Like over 500. And one of the things is, especially for the really great agencies, sometimes they turned into this like outsourced CMO without asking for it. And so, because it's like, do you have a point person? Is there a stakeholder inside of the organization that is managing, right, the different and various third-party agencies? Or is there like a de facto manager that may or may not even know that they are the de facto manager, and they may or may not even be getting paid for it, right? So I think that's another commonality that happens, is just understanding like who's on deck for what is the actual accountability, and then how are you able to have visibility across different projects, both internal and external and across external, so that you can make decisions based on the information that you're given.
I think if all of these are very important, and in the context of modern digital projects, which are even more complex than they used to be, we just spoke about how you might have a different person, one person who doesn't even know that they're actually responsible, or that others view them as the responsible one for a certain part of the project. And we spoke about the problem of handoffs as one of the challenges. in the beginning. All of this just sounds like to me that there's just so many opportunities to have bottlenecks created in the process of project management. How do you kind of prevent that, diagnose bottlenecks, avoid that as much as possible, and streamline this aspect?
Yes, they often happen. They're going to happen. And I think one of the ways to be able to see where the bottlenecks are, right, is by having that visibility that we just talked about, and being able to see what your metrics are, right? So, for example, if you're trying to get your team to adopt a new technology, a new methodology, a new anything, right? Are we tracking participation? Right. Because oftentimes we're like, people aren't using it. Or like, I know some people are using it, but not everybody. Or people are using it ish. Right. It's like if you're in ish land, actually you can track participation. You can track, whether or not people are clearing out their notifications. That's an easy one to just see, like, are you in the system or not? You could, most systems will tell you, how many people have logged in and how often, right? So that's an easy one to just see, like, are people even using the thing? Are they using it consistently? Another way is just to see backlog, right? Oftentimes you might have backlog, but you don't know why, right? Like, so now you become sort of a forensic project manager. And so is it because people are just not clicking off their statuses? Sometimes you have someone who's like phenomenal and they crush it and they are on your team and they are doing everything, but they suck at changing the status reports. And you're like, oh my God, can you just change it? Can you press the button? So sometimes, like, the backlog isn't real. Sometimes it's due to a client that, doesn't review things or whatever, maybe on a retainer, and they're just there, and you're like, okay, we know that this is how they are. They're paying us, they're a great client. Like, there's no need to, like, do anything. But now it's just clogging up our system, and sometimes you have real backlog. Right. And that's because people are not, there's bottlenecks that are happening. And so now you get to go and investigate what that is. Another one is just on-time deliverables. Are we delivering on time? Is it because of our team? Is our team, either having a capabilities gap? Are they not efficient or productive enough? Is there something up with our systems or process? Are we making promises we can't keep? Right? Or is it the clients? Are they just on a million reviews? Do we need to tighten up our client onboarding systems? Right? Like, do we need to set better expectations? Does our client management need to be tweaked? Right? So on-time deliverables will give us information around what to do. Timekeeping is massive, right? Because that way we can actually be able to make some of these decisions around the efficiency and productivity of our people, their capabilities gaps, also their burnout, right? Like, are we just giving them too much? Are we saying everything is a priority so that nothing is a priority? So their time is all over the place, right? So what does that look like? And then the other one that I would say is meetings. Taking a look at meetings on the calendar and seeing, are they effective or are they not? Because sometimes people will have meetings in lieu of good project management systems, right? Like, how many times people are like, wow, this just could have been an email, right? Or like, like, why did why did we have a meeting about this, right? So if there isn't a decision to be made, a brainstorm to be had, or a training to be done, right? Like something that needs to be course corrected, chances are you probably don't need a meeting for it. Right? You just need to tighten up your systems and have people go into the systems, have the visibility and trust them. So, I would say that's one way to, like, diagnose specific bottlenecks in the project management. But then if we're looking at process across the board, right? So I have something called the skill map, and we diagnose like 50 ops gaps in 5 minutes, right? Because operations, when we're thinking about just project management, there's the process that goes into it, the technology that we have, our workflows that are there, the documents that are sustaining it, right? And so what I mean by the documents is, if you have a content calendar, right, template, that is a document that is supporting a process and a workflow, right? Are people reinventing the wheel the entire time, or do you have something that works and works consistently and repeatably? Right? So we have those documents. Do we have the training for it? Right? Because sometimes we're like, what's going on with these on-time deliverables or with the timekeeping? And it's because there could be a lack of capabilities for one or some of the team. Even if you have a great team, sometimes the gap is in quality control. Like you have managers just doing way too much quality control because there isn't training around quality. Right. And so how do we step up our game in training? And then lastly, obviously, metrics.
I really loved especially the point about meetings, because a lot of the people creating digital experiences today are, after all, programmers, and programmers, like if there's one profession, one role that really can get their work disrupted by like back-to-back meetings, especially, it's programmers. Like I read a lot of articles and content directed at programmers, and I just yesterday, I think I read an article about that somebody was, programming something, and they had like a meeting that lasted an hour, and then they had an hour free time, and then they had another meeting, and it was like 4 1-hour meetings in an 8-hour day, with like 1 hour in between, and their manager asked, why didn't you get any work done in the other 4 hours? It was like, I mean, you need to prepare for the meetings, you need focus, you need to focus to solve complex programming issues. And it just seems to me like it just underscores what you said. A meeting can be an email, or if it doesn't need to include every single person who's kind of related to the thing that's being discussed, it might as well be an email.
Absolutely. And then there's this other thing around, we talk a lot about deep work and what does it mean to be able to like get into flow state, right? Especially if you're an engineer or if you're anybody, right? But if you're doing work that requires like deep thinking and deep execution, oftentimes you need to hit a state of flow. And it takes about 15 minutes to really hit it, right? And so if you're in back-to-back meetings, and this happens to me all the time, I'm like, right? And I switch up my calendar all the time, right? So like I'm constantly eating my own dog food. And then I'm just like, and now it got, hijacked by something else, right? But it takes about 15 minutes to get into flow. And then you figure and then if you're prepping, let's say even for 5 minutes, if you're out of a call, and let's say you're giving yourself a bio break or something, right? Because you're human, right? We're still human. So you figure it's about 20 minutes. Then you've got more or less like 35 minutes so that you can have 5 minutes to prep. So you really only have like 35 minutes of pure productivity, right? I'm not talking about like getting stuff done. And yes, like there's times where you could just section off your things and be like, all right, I'm going to get some things that are super mundane. Don't take any thinking, right? Like administrative or email or whatnot. But if we're not looking at people's actual like schedules, especially for those individuals who need the time to produce things that are lengthy, right? Like we need to actually give them the time to do that. It's really hard for them to get stuff done. And then if you're throwing more stuff on top of their plate, which we're all guilty of, right? We're like, this new thing or this opportunity or a fire or, right? Like, because it happens, then we're constantly reprioritizing what those schedules look like. And I'm going to go back to the workflows, like managing people's workflows and capacity. If we're not managing the workflows and capacity as you're throwing more stuff, right, on top of people's plates, or as you're getting more stuff on top of your plate, if you're not reprioritizing, rejiggering it, it's really hard to actually meet the deliverables that you need to meet, right? And so we have to kind of really stay on top of it and say, is this the right resource for this? Can I use somebody else? Can it be done by either a technology or a person or someone who's more junior or someone who is different, someone who has capacity, right? As opposed to just saying like, I'm going to throw everything at this one individual.
So basically, it's pretty much just as difficult for the people that are managing people as it is for the people that these managers are managing, right? We talked initially when we were discussing, topics for the call. We talked about why managers, a lot of managers hate managing people, and this is the perfect place to ask, how should managers maybe adapt their roles, adapt their approaches to have an easier, more enjoyable time and more maybe efficient, productive time managing others?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it really starts with expectations. And I think when it comes to managing people, there's a lot of literature around like what type of manager are you? Or what type of leader are you? In terms of, are you a direct leader? Are you a servant leader? Are you this type of leader? I think it doesn't matter what type of leader you are. Like, you need to have your expectations really clear with your team, right? And if the expectations are changing from up above, if you're middle management, if you're upper, right? Like, if things are changing, then the expectation is things are changing, right? Because sometimes that's really real, especially in small businesses. And getting buy-in from your team is extremely important. Like, it doesn't matter that it's a shiny new system or process or idea. Like, having the team care about what it is super important. Asking them questions about what they think would make this better, whatever the this is, I think is extremely important. And even though it might feel sometimes fruitless, you're like, I just think to do the damn thing, right? As opposed to like, what do you guys think about this? Or like, how would you make it better? It's that when people have buy-in, they are so much more likely to actually care because their voice matters. They're making an impact. And now they're starting to have some skin in the game, right? Like, now there's a sense of ownership over this. It's not something that has been imposed upon them. It is something that they are a part of. And right now there's about 5 generations in the workplace. It's one of the first times that this is happening. And, especially the younger generations really care about the impact that they are creating. And so there's a sense of, and it's a topic for a whole other thing, right? But there is a sense in the market sometimes where it's like, okay, well, there's a lack of loyalty among younger employees, right? Gen Z and millennials alike. There is a lack of sometimes interest, right? It's like this general ennui, like no one really cares, or right? Or at least that sometimes is the sentiment. So to get buy-in is to have people care, right? And that is so important so that you're just not another notification, right? That is ruining someone's day because now you've asked them to do another thing. Asking people what's in it for them, right? Like really talking to them about what's in it for them. And I've said this before, like what's in it for someone doesn't necessarily have to be part of the organization, right? Because if we look at the stats, I think it used to be people switch jobs every like 2.5 years. I think that's like less now. It's not like, oh, it may not necessarily be like this longevity in the workplace like it used to be back then, right? Like you're going to work here for 20 years and you're going to get promoted for blah, blah, blah. Like that's not realistic anymore. But what is realistic is someone, becoming the top of their game, right? Like really being able to like have a fantastic resume that no matter where they go, because they're in a place of flux or variability, that they're able to take on multiple things and do it well. So like what's in it for them could be inside of the organization, if there's a promotion or if there's like a carrot or if there's flexibility or time off or whatever, but it can also be for their own existentialist needs for their career. Right. And I don't think people tap into that enough. And then I think the other thing that we need to do is measure performance, have scorecards for people so that the feedback loop isn't, once a year or twice a year of actually like, how are you doing at your job? It's so that people can self-reflect and self-report.
And do you have any great examples of tools that you've used or discovered recently that you've found particularly good at helping you, helping others, helping your team solve all of these challenges that we talked about, both the stuff that we talked about in the beginning and the things that we talked about just now in the context of managers improving how they manage the people around them.
Yes. So for project management, most good project management tools will have a level of reporting and or dashboards. I am more prone to dashboards personally because I like on the spot visibility as opposed to certain tools where you have to like fill out a report and then people do it maybe like once a month or one, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like then you're having a lag in data. I like on-time data. Like I like my data now. And I don't know if I'm the only one, right? It's that when it comes to data, I really do want to be able to see what's going on at a moment's notice. So I like dashboards particularly. Most project managers will have a dashboard tool.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't necessarily think you need anything else. I think you just need to use what you have and do it as effectively as you can, right? Now, the thing with dashboards is the outputs are only as good as the inputs, right? And so we're going to go back to this dirty data, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like
Mm-hmm.
we need people to click the buttons and fill in the comment section and clear out their notifications, right? Like we want to be able to have whatever your business goals are, right? And I've seen dashboards go from, especially for project management, right? They can be, okay, like if you are measuring, let's say specific like OKRs or KPIs or rocks or, whatever your system of metrics is for the business, right? And whatever those are operationally, let's put them in the project management tool so we can see them, right? And you can see them across the board and you can share them with everybody. I think that's really important. Then you can have like team dependent dashboards if you have managers that are managing a team, right? Like have a dashboard for your team so that you can see what's really happening. Especially if your bonus is tied to it, right? Like you want to be able to have that data, right? Like you're incentivized. And so I think that's really crucial. Also, you can have, people specific dashboards or, dashboards that are seen across projects. So we can see milestones across projects if you're managing across. So we want to be able to see, okay, what information is necessary for the business, for the team, and for the KPIs that you're trying to hit individually, right? And so I think dashboards are extremely important and you can use what you have. Now, we were talking about, sort of these feedback loops with individuals and how to manage them. One of the tools that I have actually found to be really awesome with a lot of the companies that we work with, especially in the 7 to 8 figure range, is called 15-5. And what that does is it really allows us to create feedback for managing. And it keeps us on task, right? Because to give feedback, especially if you're doing like one-on-ones with your teams, or if you're having like quarterly sessions of progress, it's so easy for that to get deprioritized, right? It's like, we have this big client, or we're doing this, or we're doing that. And so it's like, I have to meet with this individual, but do I really, they're doing a good job. Like, they don't need me. We don't need to meet. And so, and actually that person that's doing a really good job really needs to hear it. It really needs to hear it from a person that they're reporting to so that they keep doing a good job. So I have found 15-5 to be a great tool to just keep us on top of prioritizing, keeping up the feedback, because the feedback is creating your culture, right? So I also find it a really good culture tool.
I loved how we kind of retraced our steps back to some of the key challenges that we kind of spoke about throughout the episodes. So, the problem of dirty data, of keeping a backlog, and also dashboards for individual team members can also help with stuff like gauging performance and stuff like that. And then on the other hand, feedback, the ways for, receiving feedback goes hand in hand with managers needing to adopt more human, more people, more employee-focused approaches. Great way to finish off a great conversation, Juliana. Thank you for joining us today. Just before we wrap things up, if listeners want to find you online, if they want to connect with you, learn more about ScaleTime, where can they do that?
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for having me. I know that growing a business can be very grueling, sometimes scary, sometimes annoying and frustrating, but it doesn't have to be that hard. So I have tons of resources. One of the easiest is joining our newsletter. Once you join, I'm really big on giving quick, actionable, big operational impact takeaways. So if you go to scaletime.co/podcast/agile drop, you can sign up there. And I've also got the 5-minute diagnostic where you uncover 50 operational gaps. We send you fancy results with a great heat map of your operations to know what you're doing well, what you're doing okay in, and what's not going so well. So definitely, if you have time, go do that. And if anything resonated and you'd love to, jump on a call, then you can also do that at scaletime.co/podcast/agile drop.
Awesome. We'll also make sure to include all the relevant stuff in the show notes. And yeah, for everybody listening right now, you can get a lot of more awesome insights from Juliana, and I hope you take her up on the offer. Juliana, thanks again for joining us. This has been great.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
And to our listeners, that's all for this episode. Have a great day, everyone, and stay safe.
Thanks for tuning in. If you'd like to check out our other episodes, you can find all of them at agiledrop.com/podcast, as well as on all the most popular podcasting platforms. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss any new episodes, and don't forget to share the podcast with your friends and colleagues.